Okay, so now that we've got this physical representation of the UDK skeleton in ZBrush, what are we going to do with it? Well, there are a couple of things that we can do. We have the proportions here. We could go into Lightbox, go to Mannequin, and grab a mannequin and append that as a subtool and put the limbs and body in a position that will correspond to the proportions of the skeleton. You could also, if you wanted to, bring in one of the pre-existing figures, the demo soldier or super average man, and line him up using the transpose tools in order to position his body to correspond with the skeleton. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight in to the actual modeling phase without sort of having that initial step by actually just turning this into a Dynamesh. And so I'm just going to come down to geometry. Actually, first what I'll do is I'll save off a duplicate, because I want to be able to refer to the original skeleton mesh. That's skeleton mesh, not skeletal mesh, in order to be able to make sure that the proportions are still following along with the skeleton. So with the subtool duplicated, I'm going to come down to Dynamesh, and we'll click this button, and it should it changes it into a Dynamesh, but you might notice that it is incredibly dense, and that's using the default resolution of 128. We've got a lot of polygons. In fact, we have got 1,000,000 polys already, and that's just with this sort of stick figure shape. And the reason for that is that if you look down there, you can see the ground plane, and because the UDK skeleton was brought in based on centimeters, the units that this skeleton is high is incredibly large for what is normally the tool size for ZBrush. So what we're going to do is we're going to just reduce this down. We can try 32, and I can unclick and re-click, and we'll just re-drag, and let's see, if we zoom in, we can see that we've still got about 1,000,000 polys. So I'm going to take this down to 16 and unmesh, remesh, and drag. Okay, it might not be working, so I'm just going to tap on that with the standard brush. Actually, I'll undo that and make sure my symmetry is on, and then tap with the standard brush. And if we draw it out now, we can see that we have gone down quite a bit. We've gone down to about 100,000, which is fine for what we need, because we're going to be working on fairly rough details at the moment. So I'm going to switch off the poly frame and just sort of look at our skeleton, and I'm going to switch off the undynameshed skeleton just so I can focus on this for now. Now these hands are more or less the right size and shape, so I want to keep those pretty much the same proportions. So what I might do is just mask these off, and not too much of the wrist, so I'll unmask that wrist, and maybe a little bit of the hand leading into it. Actually no, I'll remask that, because I'll do that manually. Okay, so with those hands masked off, I'm going to reframe up, and I'm going to come down to my deformation tab, and under deformation I'm going to try the inflate, and let's see. Okay, that will take ages. Oh well, it's getting there, but it's probably just quicker if I come in with the inflate brush, and I'll do it like this, and I'll take my Z intensity down and just sort of swell out and bulge out this mesh. And we're not sort of really concerned with getting too much of the shape that we're looking for just yet. All we're doing is building up our bulk, and if we look at polyframe we can see that we've really made a mess of the polygons. We've got lots of overlapping and hideous sort of polygon shapes, and just make sure Dynamesh is still on. Yeah, it's because the hands were masked. But there we go, we've more or less fixed that with just that click, and now we've got a little bit more geometry to work with. And what I'll do is I'll also come in here and fix up these wrists, because even though the hands were more or less the right size, the wrists, I had to mask those off. So with that done, and I'll just remesh, make sure we get rid of a lot of that. I might come in with the move brush, and I'll just go with the basic move brush, and I'm just going to move out some of this geometry into more of a sort of a humanoid body shape. Now, I say humanoid body, we've got the opportunity to create all sorts of interesting characters in ZBrush. The only thing that we're really restricted to is making sure that when we complete our character, that it actually fits with the underlying skeleton. And it doesn't look like I can reach my transparency. I might just extend that down. You'll have to trust me on here. I'm hitting the transparency button, which is just below the screen there. It's about 2 buttons down. And so just as long as the hips, and what I'll do is I'll change my material to a basic material, and because it's still a little faint, what I'm going to do is come under my preferences and draw, and the transparency color, I'm going to make it a red color. Yeah, I don't know about you. Apparently the human eye is supposed to see green better than any other color, but I've found that red seems to stick out better for me. I'm not sure what that says about my status as a human being, but it just sort of seems to fit better with me. So you can see the skeleton there. So as long as we are following this skeleton, as long as our shoulder joint is here, our elbow is here, the knee bends the same way, we're more or less sort of free to come up with all sorts of different designs for our character. So I may or may not be developing something that's quite off the wall in the next few videos. We need a head for our character. So for this sort of basic starting point, I'm going to try and make the character fairly sort of human proportioned, just to start off with, and we can go from there in terms of whether we want to continue with a human shape or whether we want a more sort of alien or cybernetic or demonic or something like that shape later on. But for now I'm just going to make sure that we have a certain amount of humanoid landmarks in our mesh. So, yeah. And I'm just going to make sure, bring my recorder back up so I know how much time is left on there. Okay, last video was very long. I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that it had gone on for half an hour. And I'll try not to be quite so long-winded, or at least partition my long-windedness into more manageable portions in future lessons. Now, the feet on the UDK character are interesting because the ankle, the ankle is way up here, and it's going down to a toe, or perhaps this is the ball of the foot here, which is quite a distance from the ankle down to there. When you sort of when you look at the rest of the body length, and the reason for that, I think, is that a lot of the UDK characters, they're all wearing platform shoes. And I'm not sure if this is because the people at Epic Games are mad keen on Kiss or 80s glam rock, or whether they want to eventually sort of cast Tom Cruise in the movie of Unreal Tournament. But for some reason all of the boots that the characters have are these massive great big clodhoppers, which do look quite cool in the games. They're like sort of, you know, really sort of weighty boots, but just remember that the ankle for these shoes, or for these feet, is way up here. Now if you wanted to, you could actually give your character sort of mini hooves. You could actually go with this structure, and instead of giving them sort of these massive great big wedges on the bottom of their feet, just make them sort of like hoof shapes, or dog leg shapes with paws at the bottom here. But for me, I'm just going to focus on or just going to go in the direction of giving them these sorts of traditional, for UDK, boots, just so that the animations do line up. Now so we're getting some of this human shape worked out, getting these proportions into place. Now I'm not sure if you want to actually watch me go through all of these, the whole procedure of creating this sort of basic physical shape. So if you are bored with this, if you have seen enough, I thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the next lesson. But if you are sort of interested in watching me come up with this humanoid shape, maybe you're having problems sleeping and you feel like watching something which is hypnotic or sort of boring, I recommend you stay tuned, and I'll see if I can't be your own personal Valium pill. But I imagine this could be quite boring otherwise. But at any rate, I'll continue with the shaping, and what I'll probably do is I'll shape out this character and I'll record it as an undo movie, and then I'll play that back and you can see how I came up with the shape. So I'll join you with that movie after the break here. Alright, so I've got this sort of humanoid shape now. I'll just go through the process that I took to get there and play movie. So you can see I gave him a chin, the basic sort of facial features. This is what I call depopification. You can see he's got shoulder pads as well as platform boots. I had legs like that in high school. I'll just sort of fix those up. That's after riding your bike for a little while, you get muscles like that. Made sure that the fingers were a little bit better defined. Make sure his head looks a little bit more human. And so yeah, all of this was done with just the inflate brush and smoothing. And because I didn't want to go into any of the other tools without having told you that I was going to use them. But you can see how this shape has more or less been formed, and it's by no means a perfect shape or a particularly accurate shape, but it's a good starting point for modeling our character. So we will get down to that in the next lesson.